Hello, everybody. What's going on? My name is Nate Brody, and today we're going to get another quick update on the non sequitur show, the divorce. Let me just mute myself here so I don't like hear myself in the background and keep the chats open. Multiple more, and that was it. Hello, everybody. Hello, Math Pig. No. I couldn't resist. Not after last night. It seems like everybody loves these little updates. So, uh, first, why am I interested in this non-sec thing? Well, I'm just going to tell you. It has so many different weird legal issues that I'm just like so interested in. Most cases don't have like this breadth of legal problems, but on one end you have the contracts issue, whether there's a contract or not. Then you have this whole financial piece about who owes what, how much will Kyle then charge for his services, how much is Steve actually going to get. So this a one whole piece of it that's really interesting on just the civil side. And then you have this like criminal aspect of it, of was there a conspiracy to commit fraud, and was there an actual fraud, and who committed fraud, because now Steve is saying that Kyle could have possibly committed some fraud. So there's so much here that it's just like it's a case that keeps on giving. Now, last night the update was just particularly, well, you know what, before I even give updates, let me just start at the beginning. The Non-Sex Show was a show. I'm more or less going to tell people what they already know. Non-Sex Show was a show here on YouTube. Two hosts, both Steve McCrae and Kyle Curtis. They developed the show, became popular. They had supposedly an oral agreement that they would both split the profits of the show 50-50 in perpetuity. Well, supposedly perpetuities. Now, later on, but during that time when they were setting the show up, the show started becoming profitable. And when the show started becoming profitable, Steve requested that Kyle hold his funds so that Steve can continue to get some type of medical insurance benefit. I'm calling it a welfare benefit. I'm saying welfare is any type of public benefit that's for the poor. So that's, for, Medicaid or, Medi-Cal, that's food stamps. That's what I'm considering to be welfare. So we all know that piece of it. So Steve said, hold my money so I can get whatever surgery or whatever. And he has tweets and videos of him actually saying that Kyle supposedly did hold the money. There was a breakup, and now Steve is requesting the funds back from Kyle. So there's a whole piece of it about, whether they actually had a contract or an agreement. I do want to just give my personal opinion right off the bat so people who are watching this can know exactly how I feel about this thing. I think no matter what happens, I think Kyle, unfortunately, is a scumbag for what he did. You got a partner, and you guys brought the show up together. You should pay the guy. Give the guy whatever money he deserves. Don't get me wrong. I'm no fan of Steve. I'm not cool with Steve at all. But what's right is right. You guys started the show together. The guy hasn't got any money, even though I understand you're trying to. There's this fraud aspect that you're trying to put out there, but you should just give the guy his money. He worked. He deserves to get paid, and the way the breakup happened, I think also was poor. Maybe Kyle's just afraid of confrontation or whatever, but that shouldn't happen to anybody. And I think even if this quote unquote fraud issue is something real, it's not really something that I think you should stop. Like even if, and it's a big if, even if Steve committed some type of fraud, I still think that doesn't change my opinion on the show or what Kyle did to Steve. I think Steve still deserves his money, and the fraud issue honestly is maybe just like a red herring, but it's a serious issue that I think has to be discussed. So let me go back to last night. So Steve now says he has irrefutable proof that he didn't commit any fraud, and he has irrefutable proof that he didn't use Medicaid and Medi-Cal or whatever, and he has irrefutable proof that all this stuff is good and that Kyle is saying. The last time I actually did an update on the non-sequitur beef, we were waiting for 7 days. Steve's attorney had sent Kyle's attorney a demand letter for financials, for just the full accounting, and gave him 7 days to kind of fulfill that and preserve documents and to even stop streaming. Kyle's I don't know if Kyle's attorney responded. He said he sent it to Kyle. I'm not sure if he couldn't have sent it to Kyle's attorney because he doesn't know who the attorney is. So he sent it to Kyle. Kyle then made this quick response back that, hey, I'll give you your money when you show me that you reported this income to Medicaid, Medi-Cal, or to the welfare people in California. Steve now responds that, hey, how can I report money I don't even know how much to have, to Medi-Cal? So Steve is saying, well, give me the financials so I can report it if I'm going to report it. And Kyle is saying, well, I'm not going to give it to you unless you report it. So that's kind of horrible nonsense. How can you report money that you don't even know you have, especially now? So maybe Kyle doesn't have the money. I don't know. It seems like there's an issue here. Like, how can I ask someone to report money to Medi-Cal that I haven't told them how much they actually have? So it is, I don't know. It's a little strange. It's a little strange, but that is, I think, where we're at right now. Kyle is saying report this money to Medi-Cal. Steve is just saying, how much money do I have? So I can do it. Sounds like Birdman a little. And yeah, another thing that I thought was very interesting is that Steve last night in one of his streams, he said that he's reported everything to Medi-Cal. But if that's true, then what did you report? Because you couldn't report an income because it's a weird excuse, and I don't think people think about what they're talking about. Steve has said that he didn't know how much money, and his excuse now for the fraud is that I didn't know how much money I had, so I couldn't report anything. But now, last night he goes on, he says that he's reported his income to Medi-Cal. But how can you report income you don't have? So it seems like Steve is now just saying stuff like, hey, I'm reporting money I don't know I had to Medi-Cal, and I've already done it. I have irrefutable proof. Maybe he does. It just, these things just don't make sense to me. Kyle hasn't told you how much money you have. What did you report to Medi-Cal? Now Steve is going and saying he's reported everything that he doesn't know he had. I don't know. So that seems to be where we're at today. So Steve is saying that they have an attorney and they're going to file in North Carolina, and it's going to be interesting for a couple of reasons because, it's the story seems to be evolving as these things have been coming out. So for everyone out there, the legal issue that I'm interested in, the first one is just the financial issue. Steve is now going to, so let's say he's going to go sue for the financials. And if you sue for the financials and you're not suing for the financials, he's going to probably ask the court to force Kyle to give all the financials. I think it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting because to do that, you have to have some legal right to do that, right? You have to have some legal right to ask someone. Like, I can't go to Coca-Cola and demand their financials. Well, I could because they're a publicly traded company, but I'm talking about like any private company or a private person. I can't just go to the corner store who may not be a privately owned company and say, I want your financials. It doesn't make sense. I have to have some legal right or some reason to ask you for your financials, especially if you're not like a publicly traded company. So I don't know what Steve's legal right to those documents are. Maybe he's going to say they were partners. Maybe he's going to say they had a contract. If they did have a contract, then he would have that right. But, that's something that has to be figured out in a North Carolina court, it seems like. So, we'll see how that all goes down. Also, all right, so on the financial piece, I think that's kind of, that's going to be a little muddier piece. I do think Steve, with all this video evidence and stuff, he may be able to prove that they had an oral agreement. And I don't know how North Carolina will treat it, but maybe North Carolina will have it so they, it upholds their oral agreement and they can have all this stuff. So I'm not even sure. But it seems to me that the first part of this about the financials is going to be, it's not as easy as give me the financials. I think they have a clock running now. It's been 40 days for the financials. So we'll see that's going to be interesting. And another great thing is when they file, we can actually then look at the case because it's going to be a public record of the case. So that'll be great. We'll go on and I'll see if I can get the case if they eventually file and look to see what all the allegations are and everything, because it's different filing something than just saying something online. So we'll be able to see both the filing, what Steve files, and Kyle's going to have to respond. And then there you're going to see who the attorneys are. So I'm hoping they file so we can get all this information. It'll be great to actually see it in real life. And that's the reason why I'm even doing these sets of videos, because, anticipating that they're actually going to file, we'll actually be getting some good insight about what's going on and what the allegations are and so forth. Now, the second piece of this that I'm always interested in is the criminal aspect of it. It's a possible criminal aspect of it. Now, understand this. At the beginning of this, and I don't think these facts are disputed, but I'm still going to say allegedly, just in case. But allegedly, from the video whose texted tweets from Steve, when they got into this agreement, they started making some money. Steve knows that this may be a problem for his welfare. I have to stay under a certain income level to get welfare. So Steve then asks or requests that Kyle hold whatever funds. So the first thing I want to dispel is that a lot of people think that Kyle was just stealing money from Steve and Kyle was just not paying Steve. And that happens not to be the case. Steve requested that Kyle hold the money until this particular point in time. So Steve said, Kyle, hold all of my money. And the reason for that was so he can continue to get Medi-Cal or medical services. Now, that piece of it, I think it's important, because it seems like a lot of people are trying to wrap their head around, why hasn't Steve gotten his money right now, like exactly right now? And that's the reason, because he told Kyle to hold these funds. So if Kyle was paying him previously, then he wouldn't have any problem. But he actually asked Kyle to hold the funds. So that's kind of where you're at, hold my funds so I can get Medi-Cal. So why did I consider that to be a problem? Well, there's two problems. The first is a conspiracy to commit a crime, and the second is the actual crime of fraud. Now, I want to be very clear. I don't know if any fraud was actually committed. I don't know if there's a conspiracy to commit the fraud. I can just go on the tweets, the video clips, and everything that I've been seeing and everything that people have been saying, and I'm giving an opinion on that. So I don't know what the actual evidence they have, but from what I've been seeing, this seems to be what's been going on. So just to take everybody back about 10 days ago, Steve reached out to Kyle, said, give me all this paperwork. And Kyle responded back, yeah, when you prove to us that you reported this money to Medi-Cal or to the welfare place. So that's where that ended. But let me talk about the conspiracy to commit a crime or the conspiracy to commit fraud. A lot of people seem to be misunderstanding that you don't have to actually commit a crime to be involved in a conspiracy. Let me explain. I think last time I spoke about this, Dragnot was we were talking about with Dragnot, and he made mention of the crime of conspiracy to commit murder. What happens is that the person doesn't actually have to be killed for you to have a conspiracy to commit murder. You can have the plan, you can get all the weapons, you can hire the hitman, and the law recognizes that after you get to a certain point, then you've actually committed a conspiracy. So, it would be stupid to say, okay, we can't charge you with conspiracy to commit murder, even though you hired the hitman, you got the guns, and you're pointing a gun at the guy. At that particular point, you don't have to kill the person that committed the crime. So a conspiracy is all about the plan. It's all about the people getting together, and it's all about the action of, the overt act of let's get as close to committing this crime as possible before we're stopped. So in this particular instance, what seems conspiratorial, like a conspiracy here, would be the fact that the agreement, I want you to hold my money for the purposes of getting this welfare benefit that I wouldn't be entitled to if I received that money. That's the first piece of it. That's the agreement. The second piece of it is the act of actually holding the money and not doing it, and then the person actually getting the benefit. So Steve actually continued to be on Medi-Cal. He received that benefit. Maybe he did, even if he didn't use it or not, he was still actively on Medi-Cal. And for that reason, because he told Kyle to hold the money. So here it seems like you have mostly everything you need. You have the agreement. You have the person saying, yes, keep the money, for the reason of me staying on this public benefit that I wouldn't be able to stay on without it. That seems to be the conspiracy. Now, let's say Steve never used Medi-Cal. Let's say, hypothetically, he just stayed on and or he even didn't make enough money to even qualify to get thrown off Medi-Cal. The fact that they had this agreement, the fact that they had all of this plan, that is the piece that would be problematic, because it's like, okay, well, even if you still qualified for it because the show didn't really make that much money, or the fact that you never even used Medi-Cal, that wouldn't really overcome the conspiratorial piece of it, that you guys kind of set up this plan to do this. Now, just to be clear, Kyle has come forward and said that he did not, he was not in an agreement to do this with Steve. He was trying to give Steve the money all the time, and Steve was saying that, this is from Kyle's perspective, that Steve was saying, no, give the money. And from Steve's perspective, he's saying that there is no fraud. And some of the excuses that they gave yesterday, but again, this was against the fraud, not a conspiracy. So just for the fraud aspect of it, the problem, I think, is just what it is. Did they commit fraud? Did they commit conspiracy to commit fraud? I'm not sure, but it seems likely if this was if the plan is, and again, let's just keep it simple, let's not complicate it. You hold my money so I can continue to receive a public benefit that I would not qualify for, or that I possibly would not qualify for because I would make too much money. That seems problematic in of itself. So they have to overcome that. So that's irrespective of them actually committing the fraud. So that's the first problem, which seems like the criminal aspect of it. So we talked about the civil aspect. Now we have the first part of the criminal aspect, conspiracy. That nobody's talking about that. Nobody's giving an excuse about that. So I think that's a problem. Now, the second piece of this we'd have to discuss is the actual fraud itself. Now, to prove the fraud, you have to prove a couple of things. You got to prove that, yes, he had made this money. He had the intent to defraud. He had, that money would have been enough where he wouldn't have been qualified for Medicare anymore. So there's a lot that would have to go into proving the actual fraud. I don't think the proving the actual fraud is as clear cut as possible. Well, it's not as strong a case as I think it would be for the conspiracy. I think the conspiracy is a very strong case because it's all about words, deeds, and actions, and the fact that Steve still doesn't have the money that he told Kyle to hold. That it's a stronger argument, I think, for conspiracy than it would be for the actual fraud. For the fraud, you have to bring up all these other things. So let's talk about the fraud particularly. Now, with the fraud, Steve, let's just again, this is just from the facts that have been presented from their videos and online. The facts are, Steve still received this benefit of Medi-Cal. He was still on Medi-Cal, and he told Kyle, "Do not give me the money so that I can stay on Medi-Cal." And not in those particular words, but that's kind of what Steve has alluded to, and there's screenshots and stuff where he's alluding to that. Oh, he's saying something that's extremely similar to what I've just said. Now, the argument against that is that Steve is saying that he never got any money to report. Now, again, think about that. He's saying, I never got any money to report, but then he said he did report the income, which, again, it doesn't make any sense. And then he's trying to use that argument to say, well, how would I report something that I never got? But the fact of the matter is, Steve is the one who directed Kyle to not give him the money. It's not like I can say, like, oh yeah, I know I'm getting all this money. I want you to do two things. Don't tell me how much I got, and don't give it to me. So when they come and say, hey, you made $1 million and you are still on Medicaid, well, why did you not report this? You can say, oh, well, I didn't know how much it was. So, how could I report something I didn't know? They're going to say, well, you idiot, you told the guy not to give you the money. You knew you were getting money. Matter of fact, you knew it could even be more than what was required by Medi-Cal. That's why you told him not to give the money. It's an easy argument to defeat if this was going to some type of criminal aspect. That's how I would defeat it in court. I'd be like, well, here's the video of you saying this is the reason, you knew it was possibly going to be this much money. Why didn't you even attempt to report it? Why didn't you ask this guy for did you ask him how much money was there? Why did you ask him to pay in cash? Like any of these kind of aspects, he would have to answer, because you couldn't just sit back and say, I didn't know how much money there was. Yeah, because you set up the plan so you can have that excuse. You can't be willfully ignorant. The second thing Oh, let me see this comment. It says, Steve Schill here. It's Kyle has shown to defraud Steve, and Steve doesn't collect benefits from the VA or anywhere. He has stated that many times. Well, well, I don't know. See, it's like, and that's the problem with a lot of times when you're looking at this. Steve has been putting out all this time that he has received Medi-Cal. It's weird because not only Steve, but both Steve and Kyle have said this. So if it's incorrect, it's just incorrect from what they're doing. And Steve is getting VA benefits, but the reason why he says he doesn't use the VA was because it was just too far. He had to travel and a long distance, and there was some continuity of care where Steve wanted to continue to get the benefits of Medi-Cal and continue to use the same doctors that he was using before. And I'm very sympathetic to that. I think the United States legal system, not legal system, the United States medical system is just so messed up where, you have to go through all these things. So, Steve wanting to use Medi-Cal to continue his care, it's more like, I think that's all legitimate. I don't, I am sympathetic to that. So, but again, I feel bad because, he should have been able to get whatever care he wanted to, and it shouldn't have to go through all these schemes. But the fact of the matter is he did. And I don't know if he did. The fact of the matter is he says he did. So I'm just trying to just unpack them to see what are the legal implications of that. So this reason of I just didn't know how much money I was getting or I couldn't get any money to report, well, it's kind of BS because you are the reason why. You were the one telling the guy who had the money not to give you the money, not to disclose it to you for the purpose of staying on Medi-Cal. So that argument is almost silly. It's pretty. It's just like, and the sad part about it is that there's a lot of people out there who I think are desperate to have this excuse to just say, yeah, you since you didn't know, it's okay. But think about that. That would be like almost every fraud. Then the person could just say, hey, I have an ultimate defense. I want you to hold my millions of dollars or however much money it is. I don't want to know how much money it is. Don't show me the books, and I'm just going to pretend that I'm still poor so I can get this public benefit. And then when you do give it to me, then I'm going to say, well, hey, I didn't know. It scratches the mind. Never mind money, Nate. Why hasn't Kyle shown the books to Steve? Yes, I think I am 100% true. I think Kyle should still show the books to Steve. It should be very clear that, hey, here's the money I've made, here's the money. I don't know why. I wish I knew why. I would say he should report that to Steve ASAP. Again, I think Kyle is despicable in this. I think he should be paying Steve. I think Steve did work, and I think Steve did good work. He did very good work on the show. So he should pay, yes, 110%. Steve should be paid by Kyle. No doubt about it. The second piece of the fraud defense seems to be that Steve. One other piece of this fraud defense about him not knowing is that Steve knew the money was coming in. He knew the money was coming in because that's why he told Kyle to hold it, and Kyle kept it. So it's almost I don't know. It's almost trying to pretend that the argument here is that just because I really didn't know that I had this money or how much the money was, kind of gives me the shield against it being actual fraud because, hey, I just didn't know. Number one, you would report to Medi-Cal that you've got a business venture that's starting to become profitable. They would have probably come back, okay, well, let us know when you start making money. That first month, a couple of days, or whenever the money started coming in, you would report that to Medi-Cal and say, hey, listen, this is how much we made this month, the next month, the next month. And as that money starts piling in, you can then tell Kyle and continue to hold it, but you've reported it to Medi-Cal, and then when you become over that limit, you would then be off Medi-Cal. But time and time again, Steve made it very clear, that he wanted Kyle to hold that money to keep it from his bank account so he can continue to get his benefits. It's not even, I don't even think it's a closed case, but in that small aspect of it. But we'll see. We'll see what the legal aspects of it are whenever they eventually file. The next thing is, I think the last important piece is that really think about this. The reason why Steve hasn't been paid and he doesn't have the money is specifically because he requested Kyle not give it to him. A lot of people are trying to say that Kyle is horrible for doing this, Kyle is this, Kyle is that, but you got to be very, very clear. Steve is the one that told Kyle to hold the money. This wasn't just Kyle, and then Steve is the one that's saying, "Now give me the money." So all that time, I can say up until Steve requested it 40 days ago or whatever, that may have been a good argument, but Steve is the one who said, "You hold the money." And now Kyle is saying, "Hey, I think I might be implicated in this fraud. I just want to make sure I'm okay. Did you even report that you were even making any money?" Now, a couple of people have made mention of that, Steve is making money on his own channel doing other things. Was that all that reported to Medi-Cal? Like the super chats and stuff, or he's even on Medi-Cal now. Now, I don't even know if Steve was on Medi-Cal during this time. Again, this is just from the stuff, from the public stuff that they've been putting out, just we're trying to predict what's going to happen. Let me see. It says Steve wanted money to keep secretly for the time until it was available for his daughter to have it. Maybe if he's, but you have to set up a trust. You have to set up some type of trust or some type of mechanism that's legal, so you can actually transfer this money and not become an asset to you. And again, we have the tweet where Steve says, "I wanted to keep this asset." So hold my money is not the same as have my money. Yes. And it's interesting. I was speaking to a friend about this, and it was a interesting back and forth, because there is a way that you can do this in which Kyle could have said, "Steve, hey, listen, you know what? You take all the money from the show, and after about 6 months or whatever, after you could pay me next year. In the sense of it's actually Kyle's money, and then they'll evaluate, and then Kyle could then pay him in all one lump sum, at a point later, where Kyle would then file taxes on that. Kyle would do everything legitimately, and then the next year, Kyle would then say, "Okay, Steve, here's money," but then Steve would then have to file taxes. So it would actually suck, because Kyle would have to pay income tax on the money initially. Then when he gives it to Steve would then have to pay he'd be taxed again, in California and even the federal government, because now he's making that income from what Kyle is giving him. So they would have this, this double tax almost. They could have done that legally that way. I'm thinking it may have worked, but again, you really have to look at these states and how these states interpret these things. But right now, Steve never gave Kyle the money. That's his big argument. It was never Kyle's money. It was always his money. It was always his money that he knew he was going to make, that he knew was probably going to move him over the threshold for Medi-Cal. And he set up this scheme so he could not do it. So again, I think it's interesting. I think it's interesting that no matter what happens with this case going forward, it's these legal aspects are just so interesting, because it lets you know when you're starting a business with someone, you have to really, and you start making money and start becoming profitable. There are a lot of implications here that you can't just do like you can't do these like cheap schemes that are and especially put them out in public. It's like me paying a mechanic, and I give the mechanic, he fixes my car, and I give him $1,000. He says, "Hey, listen, can you give it to me in cash, because I don't want to pay taxes on it." Right there, we're manipulating it in such a way where that guy is trying to hide his tax burden. And this is kind of the same thing where he's trying to hide this burden. And again, did he pay taxes on this money? Who's going to pay taxes on this money? If Kyle does turn it over, who's responsible for the taxes that were paid? There's so much that's involved here. I just don't know if everybody's thinking about all the implications. Just call the number. You can actually call the number and even give them the story and just say, "Hey, is this?" A lot of people just don't do their due diligence. I think if you just call Medi-Cal and probably give them the story and just say, "Hey, this is what happened. And this is what the person is saying." Well, even though they made the agreement for this person to hold the money and not turn it over, you know, this person didn't know how much they were making. Is it still Medi-Cal for them? And I think they'll say, "Well, yeah, we want to hear that case. Yeah, that's an interesting case. We want to see. We want to see the evidence." I'm assuming somebody's probably reported it now, because there are a lot of people who are just upset and wanted to report it. There were a lot of people who lived in California who wanted to report it because they were saying that this is frauding their own tax dollars. And let me see. George Mayer. Steve can't be accused of possible fraud if he isn't collecting any government benefits. Where is the fraud? Well, again, two things. Number one, the fraud, again, I'm not sure about the full facts, but there's two pieces of fraud. There's the conspiracy to commit a fraud. There's a conspiracy in which, and watch the beginning of the video so if you want to listen to it again, but essentially is Steve told Kyle to hide this money, well, told Kyle to hold this money so he didn't have to report it to Medi-Cal so he can continue to get the public benefit. That would be considered insurance fraud. And then if he did get the insurance, then he would be you would have something serious. So that's the conspiracy. They agreed to do that. And let's not forget about the actual fraud. Then what would you say if he isn't collecting any government benefits? Well, that may be true because Steve has said that he was collecting this Medi-Cal benefit. Steve and Kyle have said he were collecting this benefit. So I don't know. Maybe it's maybe you have some information. If you George Mayer, he may have an update for us because both Steve and Kyle said that Steve was collecting Medi-Cal, and Steve and Kyle both said that Steve didn't want the money so that he can continue to be on Medi-Cal. So I'm not sure what George is saying. I didn't watch the beginning of this video. I just woke up. Oh, all right. But I don't know if you've heard both Steve and Kyle both admit that yes, this is the reason why they were doing it. So, and again, there are two crimes here, possible crimes. There's the conspiracy piece and the possible fraud piece. But again, we won't know when we see the actual court documents whenever they file. We'll get more clarification because I want to make it very clear. Steve, no one really knows if Steve committed any fraud or even if there's a conspiracy to commit fraud. What we do know is just from the public pronouncements that there's a problem here in terms of, and let's just take Steve and Kyle out of it. If you read a newspaper article where a woman has gotten welfare benefits. Now, she was a YouTuber and became popular on YouTube with her partner. And to get these benefits, to get these welfare benefits, she told her partner to keep her money, the money that she earned, so she can continue to get benefits. She's got thousands of dollars and continue to get the welfare benefits. And now the government is now pursuing her. That would make total sense because if you're getting money and you're not reporting it to get off of the benefits, then it seems close enough to me to where you have a problem. So George Mayer, I'm all for reporting potential fraud. Okay, you know what, George, do this because I've actually done it, but I've called an actual attorney who deals with this type of stuff, just so I can just be clear about what the potentials are. And he advised me that yes, this is very close to fraud. But what I would say, George, do this. You don't have to report anything. You can call Medi-Cal, right? You can call their hotline and you can give them the details of this and ask them, is this something that they'll be interested in? And see what they say. Even if you're a Canadian, it's a 1-800 number. Anybody can report it. So do that. Do that for fun. It's a 1-800 number, what's it, 929, whatever, California number. Just call and then do this for yourself. You don't mention Steve, don't mention any of this. Call the number and just outline the facts and see if they say, yeah, we want to know about that. Because if that's the case, that'll answer all your questions about whether it's fraud or not. You don't have to listen to me. You can call. And again, I'm not telling you to report it. I'm just telling you to call and give them a description of what happened and say, hey, I'm just trying to figure out, is this fraud or not? And see what they say. So, yeah, I would say don't trust my opinion. Call them yourself and see what happens. And the conspiracy piece too. You can say, well, hey, they said they made a plan so they can hide, so the one guy who's getting Medi-Cal didn't have to report this money. It seems pretty simple. So I think that's where we're standing right now. So just to give a quick recap. Right now, it's been over 7 days. Steve is saying he's going to file his lawsuit. Ruhef is bankrolling the lawsuit. They have a North Carolina attorney. Matter of fact, let me speak about that. All right. Kyle's response to Steve's demand letter. It's a demand letter. It's a preservation letter. It's a whole bunch. It can be called a whole bunch of things. But the demand letter that Steve sent to Kyle about saving evidence, stop streaming. That's very standard stuff. I've sent those out before, and it's actually pretty good. It's I do it. You want to do it as an attorney to keep all the evidence fresh. And I would actually even say Steve should keep his stuff too. What would be the repercussions if he paid Steve the money now, knowing that there's a good reason to suspect fraud? Oof, that's a good question. Let me reread that question. It says, what would be the repercussions if Kyle paid Steve his money, knowing that there's a good reason to suspect fraud? Well, it could be a multiple of, for instance, it could be a completed fraud at that particular point in time. And the completed fraud would be, hold all my money so I can continue to get the welfare benefit, and then you actually pay the guy the welfare benefit. So you've kind of completed both the fraud and maybe even the conspiracy, because the conspiracy at that point would be fully completed. The fact that you had this plan, unless you make it clear that you didn't have this agreement, because the key point here is the agreement for the conspiracy, the agreement, the overt act, the agreement to commit, more or less, to hide these funds from Medi-Cal. So it's possible. It's also possible that he may just be asking for some type of declaration that, hey, you didn't, I was holding this money not for the reason that you're telling people. You're telling people I was holding this money so you can continue to get Medi-Cal. No, I wasn't holding it. I was holding it just because if I was Kyle, and let me just put it out there, if I was Kyle, I would want to make it very, very clear that, yes, I have this money and I was holding it, not for the reason Steve has been telling everybody in videos and chats and all that stuff. Not for that reason, not so that he could continue to get welfare. No, that is not the reason. I was holding that money because he told me to hold the money. That was it. There was no reason he gave me. And the second thing that I would do is I would have given him his money back. But I think, maybe that part may not be clear because, it's just not. Both of them are kind of saying that same thing. Next question. What is the specific problem for Kyle? What legal issues does Kyle himself find other than paying Steve and not paying Steve? I think paying Steve, you may have this issue about, the whole fraud issue. But I think you can easily pay him and not, I don't know. If I was Kyle, I would just pay him whatever the money really is, because there's a couple of issues here that goes to, Kyle he's not a cop in California who's going to do Medi-Cal. So let's say if I'm Steve's attorney, like, what the fuck do you have to care about my Medi-Cal and all that shit? It doesn't matter. I even if I was defrauding Medi-Cal, so what? That has nothing to do with a North Carolina court and you paying me my money in North Carolina. If I was Steve's attorney, that would be my thing. I don't give a fuck about California. I don't give a fuck. You have no right to ask me for Medi-Cal. You have no right to ask me for anything about Medi-Cal because we're in North Carolina. North Carolina courts don't have any jurisdiction on Medi-Cal. What gives you the right to tell me you don't give me my money because I didn't report my income to Medi-Cal? What the hell does that have to do? We're in North Carolina. If we were in California court, maybe you'd have an argument. We're in North Carolina. Pay me my money, and that Medi-Cal thing, the court shouldn't even listen to that. Because why? Because that's a California issue. That's a personal issue of mine in California. He doesn't need to know that, period. That's what I would be saying if I was Steve's attorney. And I think that's a very good argument. It is not Kyle's business that I didn't report this to Medi-Cal. But Kyle, I think, could respond saying, well, it is my business. Why? Because I don't want to be involved in a fraud. So that's the balance that you'd have. Next question. So the problem with Kyle is that he has shown on video receiving messages stating that Steve wanted to be held for that reason. Yes, that's the problem. I want you to hold this money for this specific reason. That's a problem. And I know people out there are going to say, well, Nate, you hate Steve. No, that is a problem. That it just is. It honestly, it's a problem, but it's a problem that I think can be overcome. Steve and Kyle should have created a legal company from the start. Yeah, you create a legal company. You keep the money actually in the corporation because the corporation pays taxes and owns that money. And then Steve could have got paid whenever. He could have got paid six months from it. Yes. George is 100% right. I think we got George coming around. George is now, he now sees the problem too. But yeah, George, you're 100% right. You create a legal corporation, an LLC or something. which I think Kyle wanted to do. And by creating the LLC, you make them both part of the board and employees of the oh, yes. George is a genius. Yes, that's the way you do it, and you would have had no problems. Thumbs up to George. The line in McCrae is now that he never used Medi-Cal, but that doesn't. All right, again, even if he never used Medi-Cal, just like the hitman never kills the target. Oh, so okay. So you never used Medi-Cal, and you never committed the murder, or you never committed the fraud, but you still have the conspiracy. You still have the agreement. I think that's the part that Kyle's most concerned about. And however, does that he wasn't enrolled in Medi-Cal. So if he wasn't enrolled in Medi-Cal, that's a whole different story. So again, that may be his argument, that he wasn't enrolled, that he doesn't care. That may be his argument. I don't know. What's the last thing? Well, being enrolled does not mean. Well, yeah, there's two arguments here. And I spoke to my friend about this. If you're enrolled in, the fraud can come into, and it all depends. It really state by state by state. Think about this. Each state has its different rules and regulations. Some states, the fact that you hid the income from the state is the crime itself, is the crime of fraud. So I'm starting to make income now. Now there's a fine line between that, because in some instances you can earn income but just didn't know you earned the income, or you could be earning income and don't know how much income you've earned. It could just be a slip, and then you could just report it and pay the fine or whatever, and that's not a criminal act because you didn't have that intent. See, here we're talking about the intent to circumvent the rules to stay on Medi-Cal, and the intent here is the piece that I want to that you should be focusing on. The act is one thing, but it's the intent. Why did Steve ask Kyle to hold the money? That's the first question anybody should be asking. If you can answer that question, well, let me ask it this way. The reason why Steve didn't get any of the money from the show up until he asked for it at that point, what was that sole reason? That sole reason was that he, again, this is what both of them have admitted to, can stay on welfare or Medi-Cal. That was the reason. So that shows the intent to keep this money off the books so he can continue to get that benefit. I don't know how you overcome that, because that intent piece is what we're talking about. Agreed, George. What about that? To be safe, shouldn't Kyle not only report the income on his channel and report the portion went to Steve? I wonder if it was mostly about child support. It could have been. Oh, this may be a child support issue too, because let's say you're making this income, but even if you're making income, the person would then have to go to child support and ask for child support to be raised up. It's funny because I'm doing all my things, so I'm going to do the child support calculations, how most states calculate child support. If you guys are interested in that, don't forget to subscribe, because we're about to make that happen. Nate, bro, the critical thing is the mens rea, the mental state. Yes, mens rea is mental state. And that was stated explicitly in messages and statements from Steve himself. Yeah, the intent. I think it's going to be hard, I think, for Steve to get over the intent issue. What was your intention by asking Kyle to hold the money? Because if as a prosecutor, and if Steve takes a stand, that would be my question. Well, what did you intend when you said this? Please hold my, or please hold the money so I can continue to get Medi-Cal, or please, all these messages. What was your intent? What did you want to do? You wanted, did you want to hold the money? Yes. Did you want to hold the money so you can continue to be on Medi-Cal? Yes. No further questions. That's, what more do I need to ask? He did it. That's it. Boom. But again, I don't know the law in California. It may be something different. So no, I don't know if you can do child support fraud. I wouldn't know. I wouldn't know. I don't know what, because again, you got to talk about the laws in that particular state. And that's why I keep prefacing this stream with, we don't know if Steve committed fraud. We don't know if they committed conspiracy. I'm just talking about general application of law and understanding that if it's against the law in California to prepare to hide or to make your income seem less than what it is to get a public benefit that requires you to have low income, if that is in some way against the law, as Medi-Cal's website says it is, then I think this is a problem, because I think that's exactly what happened. But there may be more nuance to that. Maybe Steve didn't receive Medi-Cal. Maybe maybe these public pronouncements are just some type of show that they're trying to put on to, make things more interesting for the show. Maybe tomorrow they're going to say, well, hey, people thought I was committing fraud and this was just a show and this was just a game. So you can't really say that he actually committed the fraud. Only you can say is, based on the information that's been put out here, this is kind of what it looks like. So I hope this has cleared it up. So now, we're going to we'll be waiting for the next resolution. Either Kyle is going to do one or two things. Either he's going to oh, Heretic is in here. Yo, what's up, Heretic? I'm just been monologuing happily, and I didn't even see you up in here. What's going on, bro?
No, I was quite happy to let you carry on monologuing because I think you've laid it out exceptionally clearly, and it's a very commendable way of laying it out in terms of what we know and where the situation is at. And those issues have been set out just in a very chronological fashion and what the actual issues are. But there is a concern. People are still not listening, or some people are still not listening, or they're just not getting it. And I'm unsure how that can then be taken forward so that it's even clearer to people as to what the issue actually is. You've done, this is at least a second video on this, maybe even more that you've done, and people are still not getting it. Some people. What I would say is that there's things about the evidence that we're using. And the evidence is things that Steve McRae has written himself that have come out into the public domain, either on his Twitter timelines, on his Facebook, or on his videos in the live chat where screenshots have been able to be taken. And that evidence is what you laid out about why Steve wanted things done in this way and what he was trying to avoid in terms of losing his Medi-Cal. But this is now countered somewhat by Steve McRae's own words that are coming out now, that he's clearly claiming that he was never on Medi-Cal or there was never any of this stuff. And I understand why he's doing that, but it starts begging the question, which one is the truth? And
hell yeah, that begs the question, which is true. It's just like even the stream that I saw. I'm sorry to cut you off, but even the stream that I saw the other day, I thought it was interesting because think about this. His whole argument why it's not fraud from that stream yesterday was because I didn't know how much money I was receiving, so how could I report it? And everybody laughed and smiled. Everybody's so stupid for saying that. But then literally, like I can't say literally because it's actually figuratively, in like the next couple of sentences, he says, oh yeah, but I reported all my income to Medi-Cal. What income are you talking about? You just, a couple of minutes ago, you told us that you didn't know how much you got. Now you're telling us you reported it. So, it can't, they both can't be true unless he actually knows how much income he got. How do you know? How do you know? Or like you're saying, maybe he's saying that he didn't even know how much money he was making, which is not much money. He wasn't even on Medi-Cal, which is possible. But then, were all those tweets and videos before, were they just lies? I think you hit it on the head, Heretic. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I'll let you read out Fiona's question that's in the live chat. I've got a comment that I'd like to make at the end of it if you don't cover the specific bit that I would like to cover on that.
All right. So, Fiona's hitting me hard here. All right. So the critical thing is the men's rate. Yes. Is it a problem for Steve that he keeps commenting publicly on this? No, because he's if you can see, Steve is being very, very careful about the way he's commenting on it now. So even though it's trashing the band, it's 50-50 his. He's saying it's 50-50 his. So it's like me trashing my car. Technically I can do it if I want. And it is what it is. So it all depends if he's deemed to be the owner of the brand.
This is the bit where I'd like to come in on it.
Go ahead.
And it's the bit about the 50-50 in perpetuity. And I find this really interesting because the more that he trashes the brand and that the actual entity of the non sequitur show starts making a loss, or has lost all of its income, the amount of income that he may get, if it's not cut off at the certain point of June the whatever it was when they had the discussion, and it is in perpetuity, then the amount of money in those books that is available in terms of profit to be shared 50-50 is disappearing quickly.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It's probably it's probably even like almost nothing now because of the way they've been trashing their brand. But again, there's one thing too I want to also mention about, I think, the contract that they have. And again, I'm doing a segment on contract law, and I'm gonna use this case as the example. But this whole 50-50 in perpetuity, it's an interesting aspect of the contract. I think Steve can make an argument that he has a contract because maybe the laws in North Carolina would allow him to do that. And I think you have enough from Kyle where he's agreeing to the contract, because one of the let's say, for instance, this was I've mentioned about the statute of frauds, that the law, and sometimes there's certain contracts that are so important that they have to be in writing, and usually these contracts that can't be performed within 1 year. Now, there are two aspects of it. One, if in something in perpetuity, it's a contract that could potentially be fulfilled within 1 year. It may not even violate the statute of frauds, but I'm not sure how it works in that particular state. But the second piece of it is that one of the exceptions to the statute of frauds is the fact that the other person admits that they have a contract. And I think here Kyle has admitted that they had a contract, but he may not have admitted it in perpetuity, but he did admit that they had a contract. Now, because I rewatched the Tom Rabbit Hangout where they were on, and he does admit, yeah, we had an agreement at the beginning. So even if there was an argument that it's just an oral contract, by Kyle then coming forward and saying, yes, we had this agreement, even though it's an oral contract, that I think may be enough to overcome the statute of frauds. So.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think Kyle is up a bit of a creek as well, and I've got no allegiance to either of these people. I find it a very interesting bit. The bit I find most interesting, though, is the message around Steve and what he has actually done in relation to conspiracy to fraud, and the fact that that is not getting out at all, and people are demanding that it's not the case. And maybe that's because Steve is very good at controlling the narrative and always has been. So yeah, it is going to be interesting over the next few months to see where this goes.
Well, I definitely want to see, the two things I want to see is, number one, I want to see the court documents, because you got to, even though you're going to see allegations, that would probably be the best way to kind of parse this out. So I'm I kind of feel sad to say I'm hoping, but as soon as Steve files and as soon as Kyle gives his reply, we can go and probably get these court documents and then read for ourselves what actually is the case. What are they kind of alluding to? What's happening? I think as of right now, if we're just looking at the cases of right now, we have a lot going on. We have this whole contracts issue, which it's crazy in of itself. Then we have this whole conspiracy to commit fraud issue, and we have this whole fraud issue. And I think Steve, in the narrative that they're pushing forward, is that there wasn't fraud. And I think that's and I'm going to say I think it's an ingenious way to to attack this. I got to give the devil his due. The fraud in this particular instance would be probably the most difficult thing to prove, because there's a lot more aspect to fraud. So you can't just say, there's proof that you have to put forth to say you committed a fraud. So I think attacking the fraud itself is key, because there's a lot of things, how could you report it? How much money, but the one aspect you can't really attack is the conspiracy, because they've laid that out. So in terms of being able to shape the narrative to say, hey, we didn't commit the fraud, I wasn't even on Medi-Cal or something like that. That's one aspect. But the plan and the execution of that plan, that's something separate, because they've said that in tweets and on video. And hell, Kyle did a whole, remember his whole video that he did on Non Sequitur show? Yeah, Steve is asking me to hold the money so that he can continue to receive Medi-Cal. how much more what more do you need to know? I think there are going to be some people out there, no matter what it actually says, no matter what, if Steve was put in handcuffs and arrested for it, they're going to have, they're going to say this the American system is wrong, blah blah blah. That's one thing. But if you just really just think about it as a simple, quid pro quo, I'm going to let you hold this money so I don't have to report it to Medi-Cal. That's the simplest form of welfare fraud. It is, just hide my income so I can continue to qualify for welfare. Is that what happened here? I don't know, but that's what their public statements have shown. Go ahead, Aratek. Sorry about that.
No, I don't think I've got anything more to say. So I'm probably going to drop off now and let you continue with your monologue.
Thank you. Well, I'm about to end this in about maybe 5 minutes if there's no more questions. But George, I wish George can come inside here, George Meyer, but he's not, or Mayer. Sorry, George Mayer, because it seems like he's now a little bit more convinced of the issues. But I think it's all been fascinating. George Mayer, he puts, I have a question. Steve and Kyle live in 2 different states. Which state do the lawyers use? Okay, great question. We usually say this: the plaintiff is the master of his lawsuit, but in U.S. law, each state is a different sovereign. So one thing the law doesn't allow is that within the confines of the state, you can sue people who live in that state or who do business within that state. So if Steve wants to sue Kyle, he has to do one or two things. He has to show that Kyle has done sufficient business within the state of California so it can be constitutionally acceptable for Steve to sue Kyle in California. And what it's called personal jurisdiction. There's been cases about this. It's crazy. And this is, so let's say I'm online with you now talking, and someone in Alaska doesn't like me and they sue me in an Alaska court. Well, that lawsuit wouldn't go forward because they were like, well, this guy Nate has never been to Alaska. He's never, he never talked to anybody in Alaska. So the courts in Alaska won't be able to have any jurisdiction over my personal jurisdiction. So the reason why they're in North Carolina is because Kyle is in North Carolina. So Steve would have to either do one of 3 things. He could sue Kyle in California and hope that Kyle's business or his business interests were sufficient enough in California where Steve could actually force a California court to bring him to California, or he could sue him in North Carolina where Kyle lives, and then the courts in North Carolina would then be able to have personal jurisdiction over Kyle because he lives there. So that's what Steve and them have done. They've gotten a lawyer in North Carolina and now are suing Kyle in his state. But now you're suing, there's going to be issues about what law do we use with this. But right now, it is suing Kyle within the state that he resides. So I would say North Carolina is the best venue for this. And there's also a third option where you can sue in federal court, but that's what they call diversity jurisdiction. And that's for any claims that are over $75,000. I think it's $75,000 now. But your claim has to be more than $75,000. If it is, then you can sue in federal court, and he can sue in federal court, where he's at, or federal court where Kyle's at. And that would be, but then, there's cost, and there's, then again, the court would be trying to figure out which do we use, North Carolina law, or do we live California law? So there'd be a lot more issues there. So those are the 3 options. And I think Steve and his cohorts have chose to sue Kyle where he's at in North Carolina. It's going to be cheaper. They can get an attorney there for a lot less. And so it makes more sense. But now I think the problem is when you're suing someone in a different state like North Carolina and you're a plaintiff, you're going to eventually have to go to North Carolina. So I don't know, if you don't have any money and stuff, you're going to have to eventually go to North Carolina, and do this, and maybe show up in court. 90% of cases are settled outside of court. But, if I was going to be the scumbag lawyer that represented one of these guys, I'd be like, well, shit, if he sued me from California, I need to take his deposition in North Carolina. He's suing me here in North Carolina. He got to bring his ass here, and we need to depose him or figure out a way that we can depose him, here in North Carolina. We're going to make sure he has to show up and testify in North Carolina. We're going to put things off. Like, you can play the system where it becomes very expensive for somebody in California to be suing in North Carolina. And one thing about the American legal system that I think a lot of people who are not who are from other jurisdictions, in Europe and even in Canada, is that some jurisdictions have this loser pay phenomenon where the loser of the lawsuit pays the other guy's legal fees. But in the United States, it's kind of like, that's really, really rare. It's usually you got to pay your own legal costs. You don't force the other side unless it's something really egregious. So here, if everything works out, it's likely that they're going to have to pay their own legal costs. If that's the case, then we're talking about a lot of money that's being lost just to gain that money. So I don't know how much money we're talking about. We could be talking about $1,000. We could be talking about $100,000. I don't know. But if that's the case, if we're not talking about a lot of money, then we could be, who's ever paying this could be losing in North Carolina. Yeah. Fiona, question. So how do potential Medi-Cal fraud pay out for Kyle in North Carolina? Isn't conspiracy to defraud a federal offense? No. Well, we're talking about this would be a state crime. You could have some issues with going over state lines, but when it comes to criminal acts here in the United States, what I was talking about, a personal jurisdiction, that's for civil actions. For criminal actions, if you're in one state and commit a fraud in another state, then that state can get you back. They can file an arrest warrant. They can, and they can have you extradited back to the state that you committed the fraud in. So that wouldn't be a problem. That'd be more of a problem for Kyle if it became a criminal issue in California. But yeah, so for criminal issues, the rules are a little different. Actually, you can even extradite somebody for committing jaywalking because it says for any crime. So crimes are treated differently, but in civil cases, you have to have personal jurisdiction. Does the power of attorney mean that Ruhef can take the stand instead of Steve? No, obviously not. You need that whatever he'd say would be considered hearsay. You need Steve. You need to have a first-hand account of what's happening. And again, if I was Kyle, let's say if Steve does take the stand and you got Kyle, and even in a deposition, my first question is, why'd you ask Kyle to hold the money? And were you lying when you said this? Were you lying when you said this? I would destroy his credibility. Okay, when you said that you wanted him to hold the money so you get Medi-Cal, was that a truth or was it a lie? When you said that you weren't even getting Medi-Cal on this day in this stream, when you said you were never even on Medi-Cal, was this the truth or was this a lie because you said this before? Steve has been saying so many different things. His case is, if someone who, and I'm not sure his attorney's watching all this stuff, but someone who's watching this would just be, I would be destroying his credibility, And these are simple questions that you would have to ask. It wouldn't even have to be complicated. Yeah, he would have, because on the stand, his credibility would be, okay, so when you said this, you asked Kyle to hold the money so you can, for medical purposes, so you can stay on Medi-Cal. What does that mean? When you gave him sent this message, what did that mean? It's simple stuff. I would kind of put out the whole fraud or the potential fraud right there. When you asked him, when you said you didn't want the money or you wanted it, because I think Kyle even said he wanted the money in cash one time. When you said you wanted the money in cash, show that, what's the reason? And you just have him say the reason. Yeah, I wanted him to hold the money so I can get Medi-Cal. Boom, ball game. What? I don't know. We'll see. What's up, Tattooed? Now we're just going over the recent events. So I'm about to get out of here. So just to let everyone know, next thing we're going to be waiting for, Steve says he is actually going to file soon. So when they file the lawsuit, I'm going to look through it, and I'll do another one of these streams so we can all see, what are the actual allegations? What is Steve asking for? What is Kyle asking for? At that time, there'll be public documents. I'll see if we can get them scanned and sent to us, or if because I'll even pay like whatever cost it is to get them. What is the cost of filing a lawsuit like this? It all depends on the state, and it depends on how much money. To be honest with you, George, I'm not sure if we're talking about, I know here, it takes about $500-600 to file a lawsuit and get everything, court fees and all that stuff. Yeah, so it all depends on which court you file into, because some courts, small claims court is different than regular court, and then you got the city courts versus the state courts. So it really depends. So I'm not sure what the court fees are there, but they're usually something reasonable. It's really all the paperwork and the procedural stuff that that the lawyers get paid to do. So hopefully it will be something that would be pretty cool. Have you ever seen different tiers of VA insurance? No, I don't know about VA insurance. So, and what is this? The power of attorney question. So I just want to make it. Thanks for this info. Good hangout. Oh, thanks. Cool. So I just want to make it very clear. Just a couple of things. So again, I'm just following this non sequitur stuff, and I'm following the different updates. The first update we have now is Steve is saying, he's given out a couple of more reasons why he doesn't believe he has fraud. The first reason is that he didn't ever receive any money, so he didn't know how much money to report. That's one issue. But again, I don't think that helps. The second issue is that he 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 never even got Medi-Cal, which is something else. The third one is that he reported everything to Medi-Cal, which again, altogether altogether there are those three issues: how much you made for Medi-Cal, what Medi-Cal was, and well, how much you made versus reporting it to Medi-Cal. Steve is in one instance saying, I reported it to Medi-Cal, and then Steve in another instance saying, I don't know how much I reported to Medi-Cal. So we have those issues, and as you can see, I have some people in the back bothering me to come inside. So I hope you guys enjoyed this stream. Whenever I get some more updates, I'll let you guys know. Whenever I get the court documents, hopefully they'll be filed. We'll read them together. And thanks for watching. I think I have 36 people. So please, if you haven't, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and I will see you next time. Peace. Now it's funny because now it's going to be hard for me to stop the stream.